Okay, the last part of this chapter 6, we had started off talking about democracy being over on one side of the spectrum. And then in the second part, we had moved over here and we had basically said that totalitarian was the other extreme. So if democracy had the choice, and if democracy had the rights, and if democracy had the accountability and these kinds of protections, the totalitarian was about control, it was about enthusiasm, it was about brainwashing, it was about a number of negative things. But these are both extremes. The middle of the spectrum, which would be about right here, is actually going to be what is known as authoritarianism. And the trick with this is that authoritarianism is basically right in between, because oftentimes authoritarian regimes will evolve, if you will, into democracies. By the same token, if they're here in the middle, they can just as easily evolve into totalitarian type states. So they're really in the middle. They could go in either direction, and they've got elements of democracy, and they've got potential for totalitarianism, but they're really not either one yet. Let me give you a couple of quotes, and I'll start here on page 108, and this is at the very bottom. It says down here, authoritarian regimes are governed by a small group, a party, a dictator, or the army that minimizes popular input. Now I want you to think about this. Democratic countries encourage popular input. They want it, especially in a representative system. In a direct democracy, they want it even more. Totalitarian systems absolutely want popular input. They want the society, the people, the citizens to be so juiced up that they're willing to give the government significant powers that maybe the government shouldn't have. Well, these authoritarian folks look at this a little different. They want to minimize popular input. Their argument is the less people care about politics, in fact, the easier it's going to be for us to rule. We want you to focus on your life. We want you to focus on your family. We don't want to control every element of things. But in fact, what we want to do is we want to minimize this input, because what you don't know is actually not going to hurt you. At least that's what the authoritarian mindset is. To give you another couple of quotes up here, and again, this is just jumping from 108, this is over to 109 now, and this is the only indented paragraph. It says, authoritarian regimes limit individual freedoms in favor of a hierarchical organization of command, obedience, and order. Citizens obey laws and pay taxes they have no voice in establishing. Some trappings of democracy may exist for appearance's sake. Elections confirm the rule of the dominant party. Opponents have no chance, and some are elected. Think about this. Command, obedience, and order. Authoritarian regimes are basically going to take a look at this, and they're going to say, you know what? We, the government, need to have more power. These are typically going to be poorer countries, and their first thought is that we need more power in order to be able to begin to develop economic systems, economic growth, jobs, food, basic things that poor countries don't always have. And then the sense of it is that, you know what, we'll take care of the economics, we want to minimize this popular input, you do as you're told in certain areas, and then in fact we will leave you alone in others. So the idea is that as the economics begin to grow more and more, the government in fact is going to say, look what we've done for you, we've needed this power in order to be able to do it, now you go and you take this food, you take these jobs, you take these wages and things, live your lives, but in fact when it comes back to these economic issues, we're going to rule. You are not going to have any say in economic issues, the taxes that you pay, a number of laws that help us maintain our control, but our sense is that as long as you're fed, as long as you've got a roof over your head, you're not going to get too upset. You're going to focus on your own lives. When you look at this, up here it mentions economics and authoritarian capitalists, and that's basically what we're saying in this. Authoritarian governments are typically trying to organize the economic side of the house. And in fact, in terms of rights, they're typically to give more freedoms, in fact, than when you think about the totalitarian systems that we had talked about in the last video, because they're not trying to regulate everything. There's some Disney videos that I'll probably show later in the semester where it mentions that there was an approved list of names of children in old Nazi Germany. They're not going to try and name your children. They're not going to try and encourage you to have a certain number of children. They're going to require you to do certain things to help boost the economy. And then as long as you obey, as long as you're quiet, as long as you follow their command, then in fact they're going to leave you alone. They're going to be more interested in disinterest than they're going to be interested in enthusiasm. Now, as far as this poor quote is concerned, on page 111, and I'll give you this one, and this is, again, another really good quote, and this is the first full indented paragraph, and it's about 6 lines in. It says, it was as if the dictator said, I'll take care of politics and you just work on your various businesses. Meaning the government is going to take care of the heavy lifting and you take care of the smaller aspects of your life. Don't be concerned with us. We know better than you do on certain elements of things. Now, the other piece up here, and this is a term that maybe you've heard or maybe not, and it's called petrostates. A petrostate is basically going to be an economy that is based primarily on oil. And what you see as you look at these petrostates, or countries that are based, the economies are based on one resource generally, they are typically more authoritarian. Why? The government's got to protect that one resource. Whether it's the petrostates, and you could think of OPEC nations or some Middle Eastern nations, or whether it's cocoa or a particular crop, or whatever the case might be. The government is going to be very authoritarian in regulating that particular element of the economy because they know that if that falls apart, the entire economy falls apart, and ultimately their government, their regime will too. One last piece, and to give you something to think about. People dog out President Bush with the Iraq War, and maybe it's justified. Maybe it's justified, maybe it's not. This is going to be something that's really going to take history to tell. But the idea is the fourth piece is the democratic peace theory. Some folks have argued that Bush went into Iraq because Saddam had attempted to kill his daddy. Some people have suggested that Bush went into Iraq to finish the job that his daddy didn't finish with that first Gulf War in the early 90s. Some folks have said that we went into Iraq, the United States, in order to secure oil supplies. But there's another piece to this, at least justification that's come from the administration, and that is to establish democracy. The democratic peace theory says that when they were democratic, no two nations that were democracies have ever gone to war against each other. Now I want you to think about that. I'll say it one more time. No two nations that were both democratic have ever gone to war with each other. So the idea behind the democratic peace theory is that if you've got totalitarian and authoritarian systems out there, we are more likely to go to war or fight them. But if, in fact, we can convert them to democratic countries, to democracies, then, in fact, not only are they not going to be our enemies, but they're going to be much easier to trade with. Economic allies, cultural allies. There's going to be more of an exchange between these countries because democracies don't fight other democracies. So, with this in context, to take it back up to Roman numeral 1, if we're going to try and have this accountability and this legitimate choice, if we're going to try and have majority rules and minority rights and all of these circumstances that I'd mentioned before, this sounds like an unqualified positive. However, there are two articles that I wanted to mention very quickly from the section. The first one is actually going to be called Bush's Mideast Democracy Push Aids Islamists. Here's the funny piece about this. When you open up countries to democracy, you're opening up individual choice. You're opening up accountability. You're opening up elections for peoples that have never had these elections either before or maybe even in their lifetimes if they had had them previously. When you look at it, this article, Bush's Mideast Democracy Push Aids Islamists. The idea is that while people dog Bush, and to a certain extent rightfully so, a lot of people will say that Bush has pushed democracy better than many other American presidents. No denying this element of things because he's given the contributions, he's certainly maybe tried to invade and create democracy that way, but there have also been the more legitimate ways of doing it as well. The problem in this article is that Islamists are actually the ones that are winning the elections. And I'll read off this section really quick. It says, Islamist groups espouse Islam as the answer to their country's problems. They appeal to large segments of Arab societies, particularly when the only alternative is the repressive state apparatus. They've proved adept at providing social services that governments often don't, and they're largely free of financial corruption that plague many Arab countries. Problem here is that a number of these Islamist groups are also probably defined as terrorist groups by the United States government. So on the one hand, while you push democracy, is it contradictory if in fact it's terrorists that get selected into the office? Does that mean that the United States or any country trying to help a democratic nation should try and fix the elections a little bit to make sure the quote-unquote right people ultimately get selected? The other one that I wanted to mention is actually Africa is still struggling for democracy. In this article, it basically talks about how there are a lot of African nations that are in the process of having democratic elections. Again, for the first time in a long time, for the first time in their lifetime, maybe for the first time ever. Bottom line from this article is that it suggests just because you create democracies, just because you have elections, it doesn't mean that you solve the country's problems. And in fact, just because you're having elections, it doesn't mean that you've created democracy. It's actually just a first step. So the idea is that you can create a democracy, have elections, and everything is all of a sudden good is absolutely not practical. It's not plausible at all. And in fact, what you're seeing is that these democracies are failing because there's more to it than just casting ballots and actually counting votes. I give these to you because when you look at this overall in the big picture, there are totalitarian, there are democratic, and there are authoritarian systems that are out there. And to be honest, the United States probably jumps back and forth between these three categories at different times, although it's primarily democratic. One thing that can't be denied is that the democratic peace theory, no democratic countries have fought other democratic countries while they were both democratic. With this in mind, how do we create better democracies? It hasn't necessarily worked in either Africa or in the Middle East at this point.